Welcome along to the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, and we are delighted, Paul, to have our first returning guest this week. We have Clare Jones in the house with us. Clare, how are you doing?
I'm very privileged to be invited back, so I'm doing well, thank you guys.
Well, we wanted to have you back because it feels like we've been talking about everything that you said in every episode since you've been gone. So it sort of felt appropriate to sort of bring you back on board and get some fresh insights from you as we kind of tick off round six. But have you been, what you've been up to since we last spoke to you?
Gosh, I mean it's mad, isn't it? When you retire, you're supposed to have all this time off, but I just feel like I am just so in it with Netball 2.0. So yeah, lots of family time and lots of auntie catch ups and yeah, just yeah, cracking on really.
And obviously watching netball, Claire. Clearly,
Of course. What else do you do on the weekends? I don't know. So I've just
this
replaced
is a fair
basically
point.
playing with watching it. So it's I don't think my life has changed that much if I'm honest.
Well, we'll enjoy those insights from you from your NSL watching because we called it Feaster. It was, I think, where
You
we might
call
have landed. The Easter feast that was the weekend. We'll get into that and review it. But first, Paul, the news. What have we got this week?
Yeah, news. Obviously, first reference. Just for those who were aware, last week we had a statement from Sky regarding streaming, which I think was pretty broadly well received. Most people were kind of, okay, this is great, good acknowledgement. And I have to say, weekend seemed, from everything that I watched. I watched Rhinos Dragons on Speed Watch this morning when I was catching up, but it looked to me like everything went down really well. The Mavericks Lightning game looked really high quality as well. So I don't know if there was kind of I don't know if that was just a light that was in that building. So yeah, look, we continue to move on, but good to see it was positively received first of all, Chloe.
Yeah, I think that's we're being heard. People are listening, and if things are improving, then that's all we can ask for. But it's good that we kind of got that ball sort of hopefully rolling a little bit.
And we know everyone's working hard, right? Like ultimately, we do know like people aren't doing this stuff on purpose. We know people are working hard. So
Talking of working hard, one of the games that wasn't in the Super League but was unbelievable was the Swifts-Thunderbirds game over in SSN. Did you guys manage to get a watch of that one?
I managed to follow it on socials, and it was thrilling. Basically, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I probably need to get myself a netball pass to start catching up on all of this. It looked incredible. That's all I can say. I know you would have watched it, Chloe. Claire, did you?
I was the same as you, Paul. I was also following on socials, but it is certainly on my to watch. I think I was probably a bit netballed out with our side of the netball, so it's on my to watch list.
Go
Well, I
on,
think
Chloe.
it's fair to say that the Swifts have really put their foot down as the dominant team in this Super League, this Super Netball season. Grace Wecke is continuing to impress. I can't believe I left them out of my top four. I rue that day. Every day passes, but interesting to see that the Thunderbirds weren't too far off, but maybe missing some big performances from their usual big players. I think Shamira Sterling Humphrey had a quiet game. Romelda Aiken George had a bit of a nightmare as well. So lots to work on, but super exciting to see all those stars over there delivering the drama. So, but we have our own drama over here, don't we, Paul?
But I think that's kind of why I stuck it in the running order today, because I think when I saw those two starting lineups drop, I thought to myself, like, this is what we've got to be aiming for at some point, like whether it's 2 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, these type of lineups, superstars all over the court. We mentioned it before. That is kind of where we want this league to go. And Claire, as a former player, I'm sure you'd echo that.
Definitely, it is. It's your pinnacle probably of your domestic season. I think what will be really interesting for me is to see actually what kind of our UK franchises will start to be able to offer to players potentially looking from Australia to come over. I think probably SSN is very glamorized in terms of, you know, what a full-time athlete looks like and what facilities are there, what resources are provided, etc. So I think that's going to be slowly but surely an expectation, I think, on the franchises in the UK, which is really exciting if that's the direction that we go in. But I think that is ultimately what will be the pull for the perhaps Aussies, New Zealanders, etc. to come over.
A Hollywood of netball, someone once called it. I think it is. I think it is. Paul, we've had quite a major injury update as well from Leah Middleton. She shared a video of how she's getting on. I encourage everybody to watch it to sort of see it in her own words and the images that kind of go with it. But we now know that it was a compound ankle dislocation, which sort of means that the bone came out of the joint and through the skin. So we knew it was pretty horrific, but hearing it like that, I think just kind of tells you quite how bad it was. No other broken bones to the ankle or leg, but there is sort of damage to the artery and nerves in the foot. And she ruptured some of the lateral ligaments in the ankle. So there's some soft tissue damage. It's going to be a long road, but it looks like Leah is being super well supported by those around her, by the Dragons. Claire, you're nodding along. How important is it to have your people around you when one of your teammates is going through something really difficult?
It's everything. It gives me a little bit of goosebumps because I just remember kind of, you know, big injuries such as Beth and Dyke. We kind of went through 2 ACLs with her, and when you lose someone like that, and in this instance like Leah, you know, she's just such a lovable character. She's great to have in every team. She's, you know, both on and off the court. It's a really hard loss to take as personally and as a teammate. But I think from experience, I know that kind of Dragons is a club where you will be nurtured, you'll be looked after, and people will step up around you to ensure that, you know, you're making progress, you're keeping kind of a positive light on things in times where it's really hard to do so. So I've got every confidence that Leah's going to be well looked after, and certainly wishing her a kind of a speedy and safe recovery as well.
I suppose slightly related to that as well, I think this was after last pod dropped, Chloe. We did get confirmation of when that game is going to be replayed as well, which is going to be sort of on Wednesday, the 21st of May. And the game's going to be played in full as well. I think there was a suggestion that perhaps they might pick up where they left off, but it's going to be just from the beginning. And I suppose from a Dragons and from a Birmingham Panthers point of view, to now have that clarity, I suppose, Claire, is something that's important, because that was kind of, I suppose it was hanging around, wasn't it? Obviously, Leah's welfare was kind of first and foremost, but this is a sport, this is a league, this is a competition, and kind of everyone would have known that there wasn't a spare weekend. This was going to have to be sort of shoehorned in somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think clarity for players is really key. You know, it's I think to be prepped for it's going to be possibly psychologically and emotionally a difficult game to have to repeat. So I think it is only fair that actually the girls kind of are taken back from the beginning, almost kind of come at it from a different perspective by the time that they do have to play it. So it just kind of is as fair as it possibly can be when they do eventually replay.
Well, I've seen you've put netball question in the running order. Do you want to? We going to do this? Are we going there?
Right. I'm not going to read what you've put next to this, but I didn't know if this was true or not until someone sent it to me. Apparently, like someone who ran for the US Senate got hold of some netball footage. Not just any netball footage, by the way. The gold medal winning footage of England beating Australia. And I'm just going to read this out because it's astonishing. But it's had 3.2 million views, which, first of all, surprised me. Someone actually watched girls' basketball and had the idea to make it even worse. Incredible. I feel like a vegan already. Now, this is Sam Parker, Senate, who has a US flag next to his name and 177,000 followers. Like, I feel like these things crop up every now and again when someone takes a sport and completely misunderstands it. This is ridiculous, right? I will hand the floor to our former Wales international, Clare Jones. What on earth has gone on here?
Can't, guys, I can't. I can't.
I mean,
It's oh, gosh. I've got to be really careful probably about how I say this, but I can't take people who probably have never watched a game of netball in their lives, or perhaps have watched 5 to 10 minutes, and then decide to put something out so publicly. I just can't take them seriously. They could have all the accolades in the world and every kind of letters behind their names and whatnot, but I think when there's a clear just kind of nonchalance around, a subject that they quite clearly have no knowledge about, just tweet about something else. Just don't get yourself involved in something that you don't know about. Is my personal opinion.
Disrespectful, it's misogynist, and it's gross, and I can't, a shame that got 3.2 million views, but I think there was quite a lot of counter arguing going on, so some people out there fighting the good fight, I suppose, but maybe one of those you're just gonna kind of go, yeah, as Claire says, what the hell do you know about? Bye, and move on.
Yeah, I think so. I found it staggering, and I kind of think one of the first places I stumbled across it was the women's basketball reference as well. It's like they've taken women's basketball and made it worse. You are watching women's basketball at the moment, right? It's probably the fastest growing sport in the world. Like, anyway, no more oxygen. Job done. We move. That's how we deal with that, right? That's how we deal with that sort of stuff. And no better place to move. Round 6 and our absolute cracker to start the season. Start the season? Jesus, it's definitely not the start of the season. Start round 6, Friday night, Copper Box. Chloe, you and I were both there. London Pulse 61, they stay perfect. Manchester Thunder 56. I spoke to both Karen and Sam afterwards. Both seemed to take positives from it. Big picture takeaways. I'll come to you first of all, Claire. What were your thoughts?
Oh, I really enjoyed this game. Really, really enjoyed this game. I thought Thunder had a great start. And I think I mentioned the youngsters earlier on in the season, right at the very beginning. And I just think for me that Emma Rayner, I am thoroughly enjoying watching her grow in this league. She is playing with such maturity. That matchup between her and Zara Everett, I was all for from beginning to end. And I personally thought Everett had a relatively quieter game than what we're used to seeing. But I just thought Emma was brilliant in that matchup. Partnered with Anya Williams, I think she's growing and growing. And you just think, wow, this, I think a lot of people probably might have questioned kind of how Thunder would do with that inexperience. And for me, I think maybe that was probably what lost them the game overall, is just in those crucial moments where Thunder had opportunities to take control of the game. There were a few wayward passes that perhaps were a bit uncharacteristic of a Thunder game plan as a whole, and ultimately I think that's probably what kind of pipped them to the post by the end of things. But really impressive. I thought McKevitt did a really good job at keeping Scholes quiet. And Nicola Smith, do we need to say any more? My word. I remember those limbs in the very first game of the Netball World Cup, and it was Wales versus South Africa, and having to feed over Nicola Smith is terrifying. And I thought she made kind of a wealth of difference when she entered the court. So yeah, a all round super impressive game. And I think actually the way that the youngsters are strengthening is pretty scary. And then you think that you still have Paige and Lois to return. I might have to eat my own words and change what I thought might have been a Pulse Lightning final into a Pulse Thunder final.
Ooh, meaty. No, I thought this was the game of the season. I think that's probably why the word season came into your head, Paul, when you were introducing this game. It was great to be there, great to be at the Copper Box and to feel it as well, because it was really well. The turnout was pretty good. What, 2,600? They had opened the upper tier. A lot like you, Claire, that all those matchups. I think I'd picked out McKevitt's goals as in the preview, and then that delivered, and then some. And I think Nicola Smith was. I think we have to remember, had that big wrist injury, and she's sort of been building. They've been adding her in, but been kind of quiet. But here she was, like, "Hello, NSL 2.0." So that was very cool. Had big impact, and something I'll show in my PowerPoint presentation that I have for you guys on this game. But what I thought was really interesting was, Pols got the win, and I think it was, one of those where you have to remember these teams might meet possibly 3 times. They're going to meet another time, and they could, if make top 4, it could even be more times after that. So there's a sense, Paul, you sort of said this to me after, and I think it's a great way of putting it, like keeping the powder dry. There's a lot more to come out of that Thunder defence end, I think. Combinations that we could see. I think eventually we might get a Huckle, Smith, McCormick sort of back 3, and my word, wouldn't that be enormous? And then or Smith at keeper, McCormick at goal defence, if you want to change that around. We didn't see it. It's probably still being worked on, knowing Karen Gregg in the lab, but that that happened. And as you said, Claire, we saw the babies really, babies, let's call them what they are, an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, which was, quite remarkable. Pulse for the first time didn't make any changes, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that's something Karen Gregg alluded to in her BBC interview. We used our subs today, and, maybe quiet shots being fired. I don't know. Would never suggest that between these two great teams. But that was very an interesting point, and a fair point, I think, to make of that. But, can't talk about this game and not talk about the impact Fumi Fadoji had. Arms everywhere, really, like as you said, Claire, making the most of that naivety that I think we started seeing, and kind of demonstrating that you have to place a ball very, very well over her if you're going to go over her. So Paul, you were sat there with the laptop open. What did you make of it?
Yeah, look, I think it was a great game. We spoke about it, sort of key matchups, and they were all over the court. I was really interested to see how Tyler Raw would match up against Amy Carter. I've kind of said loads of times for a few years now that I think Amy's been the best centre in the league, and I thought Tyler came out of that really, really well. I spoke to her afterwards, and she relished the battle, which I think you could have probably spoken to every single player who was out on that court, and they would have said the same thing afterwards. There was so much to be gleaned from it. I definitely think kind of both teams did keep a little bit of something back. I think the Pulse change-up has been good this year, but I think it was, Sam said to me afterwards that the players were responding to the tactical changes that she was asking them to make. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to really deep dive into the numbers. I think there was a really significant difference in the super shot element of things, and as well as Thunder played, and they did play really, really well, the super shot kind of nature of how that whole game played out was massively skewered. Thunder didn't score a single in any of their super shot times. They doubled Pulse in super shot numbers, still lost by 5, but enough to take a bonus point. And we've said that those bonus point defeats might become important, so that value of staying close. And I think you alluded to this in a game earlier this season, Chloe, that sometimes, the super shot can maybe make the game appear a little bit closer than it is. And that's not to do Thunder any injustice, because I think they were super in the game and in every single quarter. But, you just need to look at the super shot numbers, and it's what pulled them back into it. I can't wait to see it again. I think we would see Nicola Smith start, and I think it will make a significant difference to what Thunder are about. I think if Lois and Paige come back, we get a T-Birds Swift kind of effort here, don't we? We get superstars all over the court. Brilliant game. And my final point on it would be, you mentioned Fumi, but I spoke last week about when athletes in any sport can sort of take over a game, and I think that was the bit in the third quarter. Fumi took over the game. I think it was on 3 successive possessions there was a turnover from Fumi or a deflection from Fumi, and it just sort of stemmed what looked like being a potential Thunder comeback. Brilliant game, great watch, loved every minute of it.
Do you want to have a look at my little picky bits that I've taken out?
Yes, things you liked, I think you called this. Is that
Things
right?
I liked by Chloe Merrill. I think you kind of alluded to it there, Paul. There's a lot tactically that was going on, and it changed quite a lot. So it wasn't a case of like one team did this and it led to this result. I think there were just lots of little matchups, moments. So I've kind of had a little dig, and for those that have maybe been following along, some of the things I've talked about have reoccurred. So that's always nice. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, at least. So I will say for it is screenshots. Unfortunately, it's not because it's a BBC game, and I'm not allowed to screen record. So.
iPlayer. Is that right? You can't screen record iPlayer.
You can't screen record iPlayer. Right. I'm just trying to share my screen with you. Okay. Yes, the Pulse box. This did some damage. For those that are aware of it. So this isn't even in an order of the game. It's just, I said, like bits that I like. But this is when Shannon Malik is on, and I think this is where the game sort of changes more towards Pulse. But look, here we are in the box. Box is there. 2 on El Murray, which I think is really interesting. But Shannon's got to go short because Amy's the only person sort of ball side and ready for the ball. And then what happens. She goes into the middle of the box because she thinks, right, break up the box. But then they kind of, Pulse sort of really shut down, come in to pick up the turnover. You see Zara Everett is coming across. So Shannon Malik is going to come out this way, and guess who? Fuma Fadoju comes out with a deflection here. So that's really, really interesting with that box. But Pulse don't actually score off the back of it because there's an attacking contact by Briat in the centre third. But as the ball comes back down the court, the box comes back out again. So Nick Smith has got the ball, the pass from McKevitt. And you can see already Pulse is setting up the box straight away. They're getting right behind their players, which I thought was really interesting, and to tell you how soon the box needs to be set up to be effective. And then look, 1, 2, 3. And Hallie Adio, I think I pointed this out when we did this previously, but she's going to pick up Malik as she tries to enter the space to keep the square, to keep it in its structure. So here we are, 1, 2, 3, 4. And look, you've got both shooters asking for ball, but Amy Carter isn't even looking because she knows that that's just not something that she wants to get stuck in on. So she's going to look backwards, which then allows the box to take on an even stronger shape. And look, it's just perfect there. Pulse are really all on the inside of their players. And then it forces Amy Carter to do this really risky ball over the top of Zara Everett. And look at how Emma Rayner has to go up to meet the ball. It's quite extraordinary that she's able to take that. And I think she did take some quite amazing passes actually throughout the game to Claire's point about how good she was. But that's risky. And that was a ball that would definitely, or should have been challenged on. Pulse will probably look back at this and gone, yeah, that was for us. So it did go in and Thunder got the goal, but I think you can see there maybe tactically in that third quarter, Paul, as you were talking about how good that sort of shape is and how rewarding it was. So another one is Pulse dictating space, and this sort of started, actually I liked this one from the centre. So everybody is pushing everybody up nice and high, so 1, 2, 3 Pulse players here. So Nicola Smith already with the ball, so it tells you that the centre pass didn't go forwards. So Shannon Malik actually gets the ball really high, and again, like nobody is behind their Pulse players; they're all being held up, and you can see here this is not there's an optimistic feed into El Murray. And El Murray gets the ball, but look where she receives it, sort of out of the circle edge, so nothing really to be done. And Emma Rayner's going to come in for the release. And it's this bit here that I really think is important. Look how Adio steps right back into where El Murray is. Zara Everett immediately at the back of Emma Rayner, and Fumi closing in up behind on Shannon Malik. And I think they believe there's an offside call. And then it's great because the camera kind of pans to this moment. So look how close. So El Moray's driven back and Shannon's kind of stepped into her place. But again, Adio hasn't stepped back at all. So that gap is tiny. That's a sort of short pass territory. And Fumi's going to track El Moray. She's going to come down the baseline to try and, so really pushing her off the back. So we cut back to this angle here. And so Emma gives it to El Moray, risky pass, but this is where the dictating of space really comes into play, because El Moray tries to give this sort of bounce pass and Zara Everett comes right in front and she gets so involved. But look how tight everything is. And look, Adio is right behind Malik, nowhere to go. And that's actually a pretty nightmare scenario to be in. And it's, a Thunder centre. So really great. Look, and the ball goes off there. So that was really cool. Pulse centre pass defence. Look at that. Sandwich. Nightmare. But it forces Pulse to go backwards. Oh no, sorry. Forgive me. They don't go backwards. Thunder don't go backwards. Sorry. They the pass actually goes off. But look at where Shannon Malik is, and then look where she actually ends up getting the second phase. So barely any ground made, and look, Pulse are right up, shut down all of that space to get right behind. And Shannon gives this ball. We've seen this, right? Shannon gives this ball over, and look who's there. Hallie Adio is going to tip that ball out of El Moray's hands, and it's another Pulse turnover. Right, Thunder centre pass defence for balance, for the purpose of balance here. But also no, this was very structured and did a job as well. Similar, they do the three over, and the job really here, and I think I'll pick this out later as you'll see, is to shut down Liz Scholes, to slow things up, because that point of connection from wing attack to goal shooter for Pulse is such a big part of their attacking threat. So the ball actually goes backwards, and really far backwards, right? That's Zara Everett there. And it's still in the centre third, and Pulse this time are behind, and there's like 3 Thunder players sat there. Zara Everett doesn't give this ball here. She's actually going to go a bit risky and go all the way over the top, because she just sees all those black dresses. Oh, and don't know what happened there. I think maybe that didn't upload properly. Anyway, then it's to Tyler Orr on the circle edge, and Tyler Orr gives this ball very quickly, but it actually is it's a poor feed, not a poor feed, maybe a combination of a poor feed, a mistime feed, and Liv Sheen, doesn't actually catch this. It goes off the back line. So that's a Thunder turnover, but it starts at the pressure at the top. It builds, and that's sort of what Karen Gregg will be hoping for. Like, if you slow up, if you send the ball back, then you get more opportunity to eat at the ball or cause errors in this case. Now the Thunderbox also does a job. Here is Nicole Briett with the ball, looking in. Nick Smith is on court, and we talked about her long limbs, but like, they've shut down Tyler Orr here as an option. So Briett goes back, Zara Everett's on the sideline, but 1, 2, 3, 4, there's the box. You can see it there. It's like Microsoft Paint in all of its glory. But Zara Everett's going to give this ball all the way over the top of the box to Liz Scholes. And if you can't already see, the box is here, but Josie Huckle's seen it, and Josie Huckle will have that. Thank you very much. So that's a Thunderbox working very well. Nicola Smith, instant impact. Just thought I had to share this moment. Liz Scholes. And Thunder were really on Liz Scholes as much as they could be, because obviously, Scholes came through the Thunder pathway. If anybody knows her better, well, as well as Pulse, it will be Thunder. But look, this immediately underestimation of Nicola Smith's range. And Claire, maybe this is the scene that you're kind of feeling familiar with. But
myself.
Yeah.
Look at the height, the range, like, that's just never going over. So that was a fantastic, and she's been on the court less than just over a minute. So that's fantastic. McKevitt Scholes. These are the moments I'm picking out where I feel like McKevitt won, by the way. But I think, there was maybe, again, a more balanced perspective might give you both, but I'm just going to give you this because I think it's interesting. But look, Liz Scholes has done a cut. cut all the way forwards and she's going to drive back, which is kind of one of her signature moves. Taylor McKevitt doesn't let her go, and that's very much kind of what she does for most of the game. She doesn't let Liz Scholes go. And so she goes all the way up with her and then drives all the way back. And Liz has to receive this ball with Taylor had been riding her all up until this moment. And then look what it forces Liz eventually into the position. She ends up giving the feed off one foot because she's out off balance. And it doesn't look like it right here, but this woman, Smith, is going to... I didn't even get the moment for you. She's going to come in and she's going to take that intercept cleanly because this is just an off-balance pass. And that's the job of a wing defence, not very glorious, but, doing the hard yards, making a difference. McKevitt versus Scholes again. This one I really like because it's a pulse turnover. And I've kind of highlighted it here. It's coming through the midcourt and Liz is stuck behind McKevitt. It's body on body, but it just means that when Fedoju has the ball here, she's not going to see Liz as an option, so it's going to go over the top of Liz down to Orr in the pocket. And then what it means, because Liz has been caught up in this battle with McKevitt, she's not an option down here. She's not on the circle edge yet, and that delay is really crucial because Liv Sheen is going to have to pop out and get the pass as she does here, and then Sheen, the shooter, is going to try and look for where she can offload, and Scholes is still not in play, well, she's in play, but she's not really in place, and the Thunder defence are pushing up, and so Sheen's going to send this ball because Scholes has got to the circle edge, but the execution of it is just not going to be there, and that's another lost ball, goes off the sideline. There. So those are just some little moments that I picked out for you that I quite enjoyed from the game. But I think you can see lots of little bits and bobs there was a lot more. And you could do a whole, and I'm sure both teams have been studying that. But kind of what we were talking about, lots of traps being set, lots of battles and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you pick out the box. I think we're slowly but surely starting to see teams perhaps kind of adopt the box. I know we'll come on to Panthers and Forest, but I started to notice that Panthers perhaps are also starting to develop more of that kind of box style defence, and it is proven effective in terms of slowing ball speed down and also putting real doubt into the minds of feeders. Again, I think you highlighted Chloe, as soon as kind of Nicole came on and formed that box, all of a sudden Pulse attackers seemed a little bit more hesitant to be using the ball speed that had paid dividends up until that point. And then on the other end, you've now in Pulse got a very kind of experienced back four. They've been playing together now for a number of years. They know each other very well, so they can kind of trust each other that when someone's kind of going on a fly, another person will be backed up. That's quite hard to know that's what you're coming up against week in, week out in a kind of a four that are very well connected in that box. And I think what's brilliant about both boxes either end is that they kind of, I think Thunder tend to cover more that middle channel, so then they're forcing really for that wide for your likes of Josie Huckle to eat that up all day long. Whereas Pulse, I found quite interesting. They were almost kind of making sure that they had that two channels very much covered, so they were squeezing in the attackers as much as they possibly could. And that's where I think the naivety maybe of the Thunder attackers fell into, because all of a sudden you had everybody kind of going into help mode to want a quick release rather than thinking about where the width is to get them out of trouble.
So I guess, Claire, to keep picking your brain, because I love what you've just said there, Thunder ought to be releasing that ball as soon as possible. That seems to be a way around the effectiveness of that pulse structure, is just don't let it get in place, like land and give.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think especially when you've got Fumi and Adio, you want to kind of keep their heads turning, or that 1 second release, so that they're not anticipating kind of where the ball is going to go. And again, a kind of vice versa. I think once you see Thunder sitting in that middle and you've got 2 attackers running pockets, that's exactly where they want you to go. So it's either we get those beautiful moments, where you fake to the pocket and then a goal shooter is usually home alone under the post, and maybe kind of a wing defence or goal defence has sighted that. That's where you can be kind of really creative with your ball kind of fakes, etc. But more often than not, I think sometimes, that draw into the pocket is a draw. It's likely it's not to be given. I know Kerry Almond is a queen of the flies. I think she's robbed many a balls off me as well. And you kind of go, no, I'm a draw. I'm a draw.
It's funny you say that, sort of almost about, like, in a funny way, goading someone into what they do. Let's have a listen to Sam, because I spoke to her afterwards and we were sort of speaking about Fumi, and she said what one of her superpowers is, amongst many. Sam, I'm going to ask you, I just don't ask Karen, those games are great to watch. How are they to kind of coach and be involved in?
Well, I really enjoyed the game, actually. I thought it was really good quality.
Yeah.
I felt both teams, had loads of skill out there. Genuine contest for ball. Really good pieces of play from both teams. I think we were comfortable in each quarter, and then they shot really well on the super shot, which sort of kept the score tight. But it didn't feel tight as we were playing the game.
Yeah, you kind of managed to keep them a little bit at arm's length, it felt like at times, but you can never underestimate a team like Thunder, because they were kind of kept chipping away.
Yeah, and that's what you expect, and we did expect that. We knew they'd come out, and we know that they've got special players that can do special things in any game, but then so have we. Mm-hmm. And I felt Nicole did really well today, for me, obviously, but the full court defence was really good. That's something we've been working really hard on, and I thought it was a good performance. I think the super shots, they scored more than us, and I think that made the game feel tighter than it was in terms of possession and working the ball through the goal.
Defensively, I was talking on a podcast this week about when a player can bend a game to their will, and it felt like Fumi did that in quarter 3. That is an incredible thing to watch, like in any sport.
Yeah, she I run out of things to say about Fumi, but she is genuinely a very, very special athlete, and if you watch Fumi a lot, you'll see her sort of working things out. As the play builds, she's just like worked out plan A, she's worked out plan B, and then when it all knits together, she's able to win a ball from any angle, anyway. She sort of knows what's coming, and I think she does that really, really well. So it's almost like tempting the opposition into a pattern, and then she knows it's coming, and then she wins the ball, and that's exceptional level of game understanding.
And you didn't use your full bench for the first time today. Was there a particular reason by it? Just what was you thinking?
No, we're still, as a coaching group, we're still all sort of talking through the game, what we're seeing, what do we want to change. But I felt that the 7 that were on were adapting to what we were coaching them, and when that happens and they can respond to those small changes we want, then it's not a bad thing to run a 7 out as well. The other 3 are still ready, and we've got Dragons next week, so that will give us an opportunity to rotate the squad up a little bit, I think. But it's quite nice for A7 to know they can see out a game, and they were really smart in the last, after we called the timeout, and we were just sort of keep the ball, run the clock down, and they did that really well, and that's just really good to see.
That was my last question. What did you say in the timeout at the end that just managed to kind of see it out? It was kind of a last super shot that, had it gone in, it might have gone a bit closer, but as you mentioned, the team were kind of in control.
Well, I think because we were ahead the whole game, you have the luxury of then running the clock down as opposed to chasing. But it's not as easy as it looks to do, so keeping possession, but we've done quite a lot of that work this week. So in our pressure sessions on Tuesday night we were really working on keeping the ball for a minute under an overload on attack, so we prepared for that, and we put ourselves in a commanding position to know we could just keep the ball. So I'm pleased we've done that in training, and then we've been able to execute that in a game.
I think that's like Fumi is probably a bit of a magician because she's so adaptable. She's so good off the body. She's so good like reading the game through court. She's so good on the body. So I think just as she's kind of constantly adapting to her attacker, an attacker has to be kind of equally above the game. I guess it's like playing a constant game of chess, whoever kind of comes up against her. But I think then also there's a huge responsibility from the attackers that are looking for their goal attacks to kind of keep Fumi guessing as well. And I think any 50-50 balls are just not to be given when you're coming up against Fumi.
And on the subject of attackers, we've all spoken about that sort of youthful element to Thunder. It was great to get Karen's thoughts as well on kind of just how her young ones adapted. As you won't be surprised to know, she was really, really pleased with them. Karen, first of all, a brilliant game to be a part of.
Yeah.
The sort of game we like to see and the sort of game we want from this new era.
Yeah, absolutely. And we knew that we could come down and do a job against Pulse. We've seen them over the last few weeks been pushed really hard, against Rhinos and Panthers last week. So we had every belief that we could come out there and do a job tonight, and I think we did ultimately. And I think so proud of the girls, what they actually put out. When you look at our shooting circle, we have got an average age of 19 years old. So for them to go out there against the formidable lineup of Fumi Fidoju and Halimat Adio is, they did a great job, and they'll only learn from that. So for me, it's all about them, the growth that we can take from today, and players, coming into roles that they might not have necessarily expected to play in at the start of this season. They're really stepping up for us, and coming up against a London Pulse team that didn't actually change their seven for the whole game, and I think that's the first time all season, and I think that's credit to what we actually put out against them tonight. So a little bit of inexperience in some of the decision making, some of the placement of some balls. It was a little bit frustrating. It's like we knew that was going to happen and we just played into it, but in some ways us playing into knowing what happened only stands us in good stead going forwards.
I was going to say, you got close, and every time you seemed to get close enough, it just kind of went away from you a little bit. Do you put that down to just a little bit of maybe inexperience, naivety?
Yeah, I think total inexperience at times, but that's okay because they really turned the screw when they needed to. They sat in a box shape. We knew they were going to sit in a box shape. We just didn't play through it and change that picture quick enough at times. But again, like when you've got an average age of a 19-year-old shooting circle, that for them is a massive learning curve. I thought our defence were excellent tonight. When we were diligent with what we were doing, getting big arms up and really putting that pressure on, we saw them fumble balls, we saw their feet be slightly off, and we were able to pick up some scraps. So we know we've got the ingredients there to be able to do a job against this Pulse team, but we've just got to keep making sure that throughout the second half of the season we just keep building on what we already know. You answered my questions about your young ones, but what about Nicola Smith? Brilliant to get her on. And the impact she had was almost immediate. Was that like a deliberate plan, and that why she came off as well? Yeah, I think Nicola's had a tough couple of weeks. She's come back from injury. She's not had any pre-season with us at all. So really, if you look at where Nicola is in her timeline with us, she's only on like week 4 or something. So if you were in a pre-season and your players were at week 4, you wouldn't expect those combinations to be firing just yet, and they haven't been firing. But to get her on in that second quarter and to see her doing the stuff that we've been really trying to drive home to her over these last few weeks, she was actually doing it and winning ball and getting hands to stuff and forcing them into errors. I think we're really starting to see her come to life, which is, goes us in good stead moving forward.
Shannon and Anya both played a certain amount. Did they both, just informationally, right? Did they play next gen before? I couldn't see.
Anya played half an hour of next gen. Shannon didn't.
So when you have to balance that in amongst everything else you guys have had to balance,
does that come into your decision making when it comes to giving the girls a certain amount of time as well?
Yeah, it kind of does, because obviously load for us is really important, but we actually got special dispensation for Anya tonight. We could have played her more than 4 quarters had we have wanted to, purely because of the amount of injuries that we've got in that shooting end. You know, we've got no Nat, Lois, Paige, Lucy Herdman's out with injury as well at the moment, so we're really thin on the ground across that next gen and NSL squad. So we had that, but it's also important that we know we've got that flexibility, but you also don't want to overload the athletes, especially when we're playing off the 10 as well. So
having lost against Lightning to start, gone on a really good run and taken this game right to the end, but for a shot right at the end it could have gone even closer. You must be really pleased with where you find your team at the moment.
Yeah, I think, I'll look at that start of the season, and coming up against Loughborough in round 1 wasn't ideal for us with the situation that we were in, squad-wise. And I actually think if we'd have played Loughborough a few rounds later, it might have been a little bit of a different story. So we have had a solid run, and we've been growing every single week. Our combinations have been definitely solidifying what we've been asking them to do tactically on the court. They're really starting to find their feet. So we know we can't stand on our laurels. We've got a lot to do before the end of the season, but ultimately we want to be in that final and pushing whoever we're against, to the wire. So happy with where we are. We know we've got a big game next week against Mavericks back in Manchester. They've got really good form at the minute. So it's pedal to the metal and off we go again.
Awesome, brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, so outstanding first game of the weekend, and then we went back to back, as we alluded to last week, with 3 games on Saturday. Any preference for where we start here, Claire? Was there anything that leapt out to you? Do you want to start with one of these?
I'm happy to go in order.
In which case, let's talk Mavericks Lightning, because I suppose we thought this might be a bit of a barometer test for Lightning, and they came through it. They won 69-57, back-to-back wins for the first time this season, which I spoke to Vic Burgess last week for a sort of an extended interview. She was very keen that they sort of start to get into that mindset. So I thought Lightning were good in this game and were in control for most of it. Claire, anything from you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought kind of Lightning took early control of the game, and they were able to maintain that. Again, a few inconsistencies throughout 60 minutes, but kind of who hasn't got inconsistencies at the moment. So I thought it was I think from the attacking end, I think between Hannah Joseph and Nat Panagari, I thought their ball speed and their ability to be adapting on the defenders, their work around circle edge was stunning. And I thought they were finding their shooters really, really well. I still think we've got more to come from Barry Neal. She's been phenomenal for Pulse for a couple of years, and I think she's maybe still just finding her feet in that Lightning end. I imagine it's a tough end to kind of come in and solidify yourself in. They've been, the Lightning team have been solid for several years now and been very stable. So I think I thought she had a really, really great game on Saturday, but I still think we've got more to be seen. I think from the defensive end, I'm loving the kind of the creativity that Lightning defence are playing with at the moment. I think Jodie Gibson just looks so happy to be playing. I think she's playing some of her best netball. I've been super impressed by her and that at goalkeeper, at goal defence. I think she's really putting her hand up and showing what it means to be out there and part of Netball 2.0. Really lovely, I think, to see Alice Harvey, I think, look a lot more confident on court. She was coming out on some lovely flies, being set up in front of her by Nat Pan and Beth Cobden. So I thought really great to see her kind of running on those flies, and then Shadeen coming on that impact, wow. I mean, she's just, yeah, she's formidable. And the laterals that she's kind of getting her hand to, it's such a hard skill to be able to do that. So I think again, not the start that Lightning would have expected or wanted for themselves. But again, I think each week they're getting more consistent. So that again, I just don't think they'll be a team to rule out when it comes to that kind of top two.
Chloe, anything from you? I thought the Mavericks attack end, which had kind of blossomed the week before, kind of stumbled a little bit just when they needed it most. And maybe that's down to, as Claire points out, the Lightning defensive effort. But what were your takeaways?
Yeah, I think Mavericks. Yeah, I was quite keen on them winning. I thought the way they kind of came out against Forest, I was expecting a bit more. I think they are getting there. They're not maybe 60-minute team. And I think the change, and it was difficult because I think Emma Thacker needed to come off, but I'm not sure Amelia Hall was the answer. And I think the matchup with Amelia Hall on Shadeen van der Merwe just wasn't, like, Shadeen was winning that very convincingly. And that really kind of was where Lightning were able to properly dominate after having taken control. I think also tactically maybe a bit let down Mavericks in the defence end because, you know, they were keeping up, but it never felt like they could take the lead. And I think it was because they couldn't really win ball. And I think Gemma Donoghue didn't know where to play on Berry Neal. At the start, Berry Neal to me had too much room to move. And then, you know, Samantha Wallace-Joseph is starting to show everybody how difficult a goal shooter she is to mark because really she can shoot from everywhere. So, you know, it's not like you can kind of push her into places. I still think, to me, Razzie Akwashi is playing some great netball. I think she was really dominant on the rebound. Like, that's really nice to see. And I think she looks happy. So that's probably why she's also playing some good netball. But I think the mid-court as well, maybe for Mavericks, couldn't keep up with there was a lot of structures going on as well, lots of holding high, lots of zones and stuff. Like, both teams were really doing it, but it looked like Mavericks were giving up on the structure earlier, and whereas Lightning were prepared as they are, like, that's one of their great traits as a team. Like, they're just going to keep going at you with their structure until they win the ball, and they did really start winning that ball. So not much in it, but I think there is still somewhere for Mavericks to go, and obviously they've got to get there quickly because they've got Thunder next. So this is where we sort of had Mavericks had a maybe easier sort of bleed into the season, and now they've got to face the pointy bits of the opposition. But yeah, what about you, Paul? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of think we asked the question, really, didn't we, of Loughborough before. It's like, you know, they changed a lot in defence and a lot in attack, and they kept faith with their mid-court. Why wouldn't you? It's a brilliant mid-court. And again, another plug, but I wanted to ask Vic Burgess about that decision-making process, and I think you've just answered it there, Chloe, really. It's like when you come into a game where you know you have to stick to your structures, stick to your principles, stick to your core game plans, I think that mid-court is so crucial to it, because we've seen the defensive end evolve with Josie and Shadeen playing their part and being able to kind of vary what Lightning do in defence. And I think we are going to see a bit more of an evolution in that attack end. And Vic said, I asked her, was it a conscious decision to not almost go like for like with Mary? And she said yes, basically. Bringing in Sam and bringing in Berry gives them a very different attacking option. And I thought we saw the first signs of how that can be a really sort of useful proposition for Lightning this year and going forward. I thought it was a really positive performance. They were in control of it, and the third quarter was just where they managed to put their foot down and pull away. They've got Panthers next, which I think will be interesting, and then I think to play Thunder in what will be maybe a very different game to what we saw in round one will be another kind of barometer. But yeah, good performance. Felt Mavs just didn't quite kick on, but as we've pointed out, they're a team that's still finding their way in a few places, and I think that was kind of not shown up. That's the wrong way to say it, but the experience of Lightning got the better of them on the day.
Yeah, I think also I just think they were maybe with the substitution choices. I think maybe a bit let down.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
I
was
might just throw
also
that out there.
sorry, Chloe. I was also thoroughly enjoying the combination in comms between Nia Jones and Leila Gusgoth. I thought it was an outstanding pairing. I thought they complemented each other so well. And I think that it really had me gripped. I think throughout the game, because I did
felt
think
I
Max
learned.
had
I felt I was learning as I was going through
That's
that game.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. And what I love, and I think this is something that Nia does so well, probably being a wing defender, is she will really she does it in a way that doesn't kind of I guess cause any disruption to the game as well, which I think is a really hard skill to have to do as a commentator. But you know, she will give that glory to that person that comes out with the intercept, for example, but she will draw attention to the work that is being done out front, etc. And hence I make reference to the wing Ds that usually have to set that work up. But it's I think it guides you as a viewer, and it gets you kind of looking at things more tactically, and rather just seeing the glory. So I thought that was a great pairing, and I thought, like I say, I thought they complemented each other so well.
A first win of the season for Panthers. I think much deserved. 71-70 over Forest. Forest keep finding themselves in these like anarchic games, is how I've described it. Great for us as fans to kind of watch and get stuck into. I think we have to kind of take hats off to Birmingham here. They've been getting closer and closer. They've deserved a win. If anyone deserves anything, you only get what you put into it. But they've come very, very close, and I thought they were good value for it in the end, Claire.
Yeah, I think I think fair play to Panthers. They have been searching for that win. They wouldn't have wanted to have started the season as they have. They've been really unfortunate with injuries that have kind of left players out. You know, I think it was maybe only last week before Gabby Marshall unfortunately suffered another head injury that they had for the first time their contracted 10 in the squad, and that was on round 5, you know. So they have had hurdle after hurdle so far in these past 6 weeks, and you know, it wasn't without challenge. They went 7-1 down, I believe, within the kind of the first 5 minutes, which called them into a tactical timeout, rightly so. And it is really hard to chase a game. It's so hard to chase a game, especially now with a super shot, which, you know, could extend the game even more so. But I thought Panthers responded so well to that tactical timeout. You know, the shooting combination, I think, with Gabby Sinclair and Betsy Creek was brilliant. For me personally, it was so nice to see Gabby Sinclair back. I know firsthand how much she can make a difference to a team. I haven't missed catching those kind of one-handed shoulder bullet passes that she can deliver. My hands are definitely more softer now. But it's so nice to see her kind of back in the mix, looking really comfortable out there and just solidifying herself in that attacking end. So I think, and I think for me it was so nice, I think, to see Jazz Brown, more of the Jazz Brown that we saw last season. Again, I think for whatever reason, she's perhaps maybe not been as much of a standout as what she was last season so far. But I think this was the game where she took leadership. She was kind of a huge presence in the back, and as soon as Panthers started to get into a rhythm of turning ball, it seemed to be the case that Forest stopped turning ball. And I think that was the difference for me, as I think Panthers just grew so nicely into the game. they handled pressure incredibly well, and you could just see the determination and what it meant to them to get that win on the board for them. So yeah, and I think absolute credit and a masterclass in how to kind of come back into a game, I would say.
Yeah, I think they're a team with a lot of character in it. So it feels nice to finally have an illustration of that that's kind of, that reflects the people that are in that team and put out the kind of performances that we know they can. But honestly, I thought the game was done in the first quarter. I really did. I wondered if we were heading towards a London Mavericks 24-8 opening quarter sort of nightmare. But for me, Jazz Brown was just phenomenal. I think she had 10 gains. But it was the rebounding as well that was just so impressive, and really kind of what I think we've been asking defenders of, the Super Shot's been asking defenders of, and to see her do that, Claire, I just completely agree with you. I think she kind of supplied the ball that then Creek and Sinclair kind of neatly put away. And it was interesting to see Tripp really with that, operating with that 10 again, like not afraid to sort of make changes. I think she might be one of the braver coaches in that sense of like really just trying it out, which I think is quite good. I mean, she's still kind of probably, like as Claire said, really learning her 10 because she had it for about 35 minutes before it was taken away from her again. But yeah, like it was, I think for Forest, a tough day in the office. I think Rhea Dixon was shooting at 56%. So she sort of put up 5 from 9. And I just think this is still a question that Forest have to answer. And as I said, we know Chelsea's aware of it. So when is that actually going to start bearing fruit? I think we can keep asking that question until it does, because that's a lot for Rolene to sort of have to deal with week in, week out, putting them up, putting, in the 1 point and the 2 point game. We know she's kind of happy in that place, but it's the variety that's going to make the difference as the season gets into the second half.
Yeah, definitely, and I think what I'm seeing a lot more clearly is kind of more defensive structures when it comes to the super shot. So you're starting to see teams now double up on more of the person that takes the majority of the super shotters. You're starting to see that skill of boxing out nice and early, so that they can't kind of go for rebounds. So that's only going to get stronger now as the stats kind of come out and we start to see actually who are the threats of taking that super shot. So it's definitely going to be a heavy load on Rolene, and she did, I think, uncharacteristically miss a few crucial super shots throughout the game. So as you say, Chloe, it's a heavy hand to hold when you're having to kind of be relied upon to do that week in, week out. And again, as the pressure grows as well, and they're searching for results. It'll be interesting how Forest go, I think, in the next couple of rounds.
I agree. I think when it becomes, I think we've mentioned this a few times in the early parts of the season, when a circle becomes quite difficult, easy to read, and I don't mean that as a negative against Rolene. She's been fantastic this year, but when Rhea's game is not quite firing, and I thought Freya Henshaw actually did pretty well when she came on, but she's still quite raw to the Super League. It does become like an experienced defence like the Panthers have got can take them on. And as much as we're singing the praises of Jazz Brown, completely agree, worthy player of the match. I thought it was the first time we saw what her and Gabby Coffey can be together as well, because I thought Gabby Coffey was brilliant. I remember you telling me before we started the pod, Chloe, and we were getting ready for sort of pre-season stuff. I didn't know a huge amount about Gabby Coffey, and Chloe said she's going to be one to watch, and I was super impressed watching her play. And I think we've spoken about squads and things like that, and I know Gabby Marshall wasn't involved, but that is a good 10 that gives Birmingham change-up options, which we've said. There are some teams who maybe can look down their bench and there isn't a huge amount of variety or confidence just yet in bringing those players on. I think that is a 10 that Joe Tripp can kind of shuffle and move around and kind of ask to do different things. So the way they go from here now, I think, is going to be really, really crucial. I was just looking as you guys were talking on their next couple of games, and it does give them a chance just to build a little bit of momentum. They've got Lightning next, which will be a good test, but then after that it's Rhinos and Dragons. So all of a sudden you could be looking at 3 wins from 4 games, maybe even a bonus point defeat in there, and they could be looking up rather than down, which I think that squad really needs to be doing. So yeah, a good win. It was perhaps a little bit closer than I think the performances merited, because I thought Birmingham were a significantly stronger team throughout. But a good game and an exciting game, another one, and it kind of, it didn't round off the weekend, but it was kind of the one that I'd watched last on sort of Saturday, and then I came back to Dragons Rhinos this morning for a bit of last minute cramming. Claire, I'll come to you first as our resident former Dragon. Still winless, Cardiff, but a win that Rhinos kind of needed, because sneakily, despite some praise, they hadn't won since round 1. So it was a win that they very much needed to go into Cardiff and take. And it was a bit of an arm wrestle, was my kind of takeaway from it.
It was physical, absolutely. But yeah, I think, going to Dragons, I've said before, it's not a comfortable place. It's been deliberately kind of created to feel uncomfortable to go and play there. So I think absolutely Rhinos probably would have been feeling the pressure and really, really wanting to take that second win of the season. I thought Dragons started really well. They took the first turnover and were able to convert. Just unfortunately, Rhinos then scored off Dragons' centre pass. So I think that then probably set the tone in terms of how the game was going to go for 60 minutes. I think it was really nice, I think, to see Georgia Rowe take some super shots. I think that has helped the attacking end massively, to have kind of more of the attackers being confident to take those super shots. I think the connection between Beth Britton and Joyce Mavula is only getting stronger and stronger. And Ash Decker is also kind of starting now to share the load in feeds. So I think when you've got kind of a centre and a wing attack who feel confident to feed, that makes it quite difficult for defenders to be able to kind of maybe know who to target or take out of the game or promote to have the ball in order to feed. In saying that, I think you have to give a mention to Alex Johnson. I think it's so hard to perhaps be in her position and know the kind of shoes that she'll have to fill, knowing that Leah isn't available for the rest of the season. And I feel as though she is playing just her absolute socks off, and she is playing with kind of that pride, and almost though she's playing for Leah. So I think like an absolute deserved mention to Alex, because I know that'll be meaning a lot for her as well, that she does that position justice. So yeah, I think defensively, I think Dragons are being really disruptive. I think overall, the scoreline has closed down in terms of how much closer Dragons are getting to perhaps their first win. But I think overall they'll just be disappointed with perhaps their personal errors that they are more than capable of being in control over. Once I think they start to become more in control of them, I don't think you can ever really rule Dragons out to be your wild card in nicking a win off someone here and there. So I think, Rhinos stood up to that pressure of playing in that fortress really, really well. But I think ultimately they kind of found and maintained control very early. And when you've got Joyce shooting the way she is, she's just pretty unstoppable at the moment, isn't she?
Chloe, what were your
Yeah, I think
takeaways?
Joyce she'd had a couple of games where I think she hadn't quite been at her best, but she was really, really good, like 91%. She was shooting super shots, really comfortable in the 1 point. I think the problem is with Joyce, if you don't go early on it and she builds, then and the connection, as Claire so beautifully elucidated there, with two feeders coming in, it's just a really difficult thing to kind of stop or slow down or get even in, basically get in front of in the end, because it just doesn't feel like a game that Dragons were ever going to, like, once it started shifting forwards, weren't going to retrieve it. Claire, when a team is making when they're making errors, right? And those are the things that sort of separating them from, being competitive. What do you do as a team and as a coach to fix those? Like, how do you talk about them? Because they must be talking about them every week. So when can we expect to see like that sort of tidied up?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think first and foremost, you've kind of got to go back to your culture. You'll obviously have kind of your expectations and perhaps where you believe that you fit, kind of in the league. When you perhaps don't start the season as well as you'd hoped, you've quickly got to go back to your culture and how you address that. How do you have those difficult conversations that make kind of people more accountable, make people more aware of what they could be doing? It's that kind of mentality of kind of look in the mirror. Are we all doing what we personally can be to be bringing our best selves, to be incrementally better every single session? It can be really uncomfortable. Sometimes you do have to put your hand up and kind of say, I gave away this many passes. I know it's not good enough. I know it's not okay. It's really hard to kind of swallow that pill sometimes, but again, at least with that kind of honesty and openness, and you're protected with that group around you, you can work with that. Then you can start to almost have, your own personal goals that no one else needs to know about. And regardless of what the outcome is and the score is, your personal goals and your personal group goals are the focus that are going to keep kind of progressing and keep that process ticking along, so that eventually you arrive at your final destination, which would hopefully be a win. And I think that's what I'm starting to kind of gather, is actually there's some personal things being focused on in the background, which I'd say for round 5 and round 6 we have had more of a consistent performance from Dragons, in that the score lines have been closed down. But as I say, it's now again, it's relentless. It's really hard and it's really relentless to have to keep going back to almost the same thing of, right, okay, errors. So what is it? How can we fix it? And at times it can be hard to kind of stay optimistic, but again, that's the power of your culture, and how do you kind of have the hard conversations but then also be able to stay optimistic, because ultimately you have to go into every single game believing that you can win it. Otherwise, what's the point? There's no point in playing if there's an inch of you that feels as though you're going to lose that game. And again, that's when it comes down to, I guess, your leadership and kind of your characters around you that are continuously kind of promoting that optimism and being able to learn from mistakes. And, for me, a personal philosophy of mine is, one error is okay because it gives us an opportunity to learn. When we're making the same error, that's costly, and that's where we've kind of got to go, no, that's not okay. So take the opportunity to learn and let's not repeat it. But it's a hard situation to be in, and it takes a lot of kind of mental energy, and of course you're training just as hard as everyone else too, so it's a tough position to be in. But there's definitely ways in which that you can kind of keep going and keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think that honesty aspect of it is something that's really interesting. It's a good question just to kind of find out. Like, no one knows more than themselves probably that they're making the mistakes, and that no one's trying harder to find a win as well. Like that, and that brings with it its own pressure, right? That you're kind of working even harder. So yeah, look, I think it'd be interesting to see where Dragons go from here. They got Pulse next to the league leaders, which is probably not the game that you want to see, and Chloe's box that have sort of forced mistakes. But then maybe it becomes a bit of a free hit as well, right? It becomes nothing to lose.
Exactly right, and I think this is where I made reference of kind of you always maybe have to look at Dragons as your wild card of picking off a result here and there, because a team, as we've seen with Panthers, that are looking for their first win are pretty dangerous because they are determined, they have a focus, they're likely going to have broken down each quarter of what their focus is going to be. I think it's sometimes maybe harder to maintain kind of a focus when you start to get used to winning, because you kind of think, well, yeah, well, we're gonna win again, right? and who knows, that I could very much be wrong in that sentence, but I think when you get used to winning, and you expect to win against teams that are kind of below you, especially, we've got a top of the table versus bottom of the table, you could be guilty of perhaps not coming out as firing as what you need to. Dragons could absolutely take advantage of that. So I think the start of that game is going to be so crucial for either teams in terms of setting that tone.
Okay, onwards then, round 7, halfway. Like, it feels like we were only just a few weeks ago, which we were, talking about the start of the season, and now we're here at a sort of pretty pivotal point. We've got a bunch of interesting games, I think, this weekend. We'll go in order, as we always do. And when we finished, maybe, Claire, we'll get you kind of halfway takeaway 1 week early, just because I think it's good to kind of see sort of some top level points from here. But let's go through the sort of preview. We'll start on Friday, which is Lightning against Panthers. Third in the table, Lightning, who despite being questioned, have sort of snuck there or thereabouts into the sort of playoff places where we knew they would be. It's a Panthers team now who come in sort of with a bit of confidence and a victory. I like the look of this as a potential game of the weekend. Claire, you're our guest. Where do you think this one might be won and lost?
I agree with you, Paul. I think Panthers will come in with their kind of tails high, and rightly so. But I think we saw Lightning this week be the most disciplined that I've seen them. And I think they will want to prove a point and send a message, I think, for the rest of the league that they are just going to continue to build and grow and develop. So I predict that it's going to be perhaps a close start. I would love to see Panthers kind of go toe for toe. But I believe the way in which Lightning's defence are playing at the moment, I think they could cause some damage for Panthers' attacking end. And again, I think the matchup for me would be a kind of Jazz Brown up against Samantha Wallace, as well as Gabby Coffey against Barry Neal. So I think those kind of two pairings of a matchup is going to be super interesting for me. So I think I would go a Lightning win, and I think they would win perhaps maybe by 8. I'm gonna say.
Love that detail.
Hello.
That detail.
Score predictions.
Changing the game again, Claire. That's what you're doing. Right, follow that, Chloe.
I'm not going to be putting a score prediction out. FYI. Yeah, no, I think everything Claire has said is really on point. But I think if you kind of zero in on that mid-court matchup, I just don't see where Panthers will win it. I think obviously Marshall is a big loss because that's Nat Panagari you're coming up against at centre. So big week for Ruth Hughes, who can be a bit guilty of not the most accurate feed, I think. And I think for me, if Joe Tripp wants to really try and get in on it early, I think Aaliyah Zaranika has to start over Michelle McGee, given that I think we feel that Brown and Coffey kind of look really good at goalkeeper god defence at the moment. I just think Zaranika is just good at riding somebody. Like, she just won't leave you alone. She's really good at that. And to me, like, that's what the Pulse game really taught us. The difference that Zaranika had on Scholes versus McGee, I think they're just very different wing defences in that sense. And I think Zaranika needs to be on the court early and starting. But yeah, I think I agree with Claire. I think it's probably Lightning's to lose. And I think, Sinclair, Gibson, I think Sinclair wins. And I think she wins against Van der Merwe. But it's also, what Tripp decides to do with Berger or Creek and how that evolves. Like, both teams can super shoot, which I think is always really important to note when we preview, because it kind of like nullifies that element a little bit. But yeah, where do you sit on it?
Yeah, I think you've kind of nailed that a little bit there, Chloe. I think Betsy Creek's evolution this season has been kind of one of the sort of unwritten stories. She's a player who's kind of shoulders back. She's kind of really come of age, certainly in the last few weeks. Like, she really took that attack end on against Forest. We didn't really mention it in the kind of review part. I'll be interested to see how she takes that on against a defensive end that always kind of tests you, always kind of, you know what you're going to get against Lightning. I think I've said a lot that I think Lightning's policy has always been, we'll outscore you. But I think that is largely down to the fact that they will back their defence to kind of make a play when they need to. So how sort of Betsy Creek, Siggy Berger and Gabby Sinclair, who we're seeing more and more of each week, adapt to sort of Jodie, Shadeen and Alice is probably where I think they might just come up a little bit short. And I think, to your point, Chloe, it will be down to the fact that the mid-court battle will probably be where this one is won and lost.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one. I think the question is, what sort of structure does Lightning put out to kind of get to Panthers' attack early? I imagine they'll hold them high and really try and force long ball in, which I reckon that will probably be fairly effective. But yeah, like, I think it will be. It could be a great one, but it could also be a walk in the park, I think. Can I say that? I think. I don't know.
You said you weren't going to make a score prediction, though.
No, I didn't. I'm not putting numbers to it. That's brave. I'm just sort of putting vacuous words next to it. It's the preview. Let me live. Okay, so the second one after that is at the same time. So takes place also on Friday at 7 p.m. 6th takes 5th. So quite a consequential game, really, this one. Leeds Rhinos versus Nottingham Forest. One had a win, one had a loss. Claire, I'm throwing it to you. What do you reckon?
Oh, I think this will be the game, I think, of the round for me. I'm excited, and I hope it brings what I kind of expect. I think, again, I'm expecting physicality. I think, my gosh, I think the bookends of both teams are going to be your matchups. But again, I cannot wait to see Ash Decker versus Neve Cooper in the middle. I think two kind of powerhouses, both kind of use their physicality so well. Both kind of I love kind of watching Neve become so much more comfortable now to feed. Again, kind of speaking from experience, it's a tough shift to go from kind of wing D into centre. But again, a centre that can defend is a pretty dangerous to have in a team. So I think it's. I actually don't know. Could this be our first draw? Could this be first extra time? I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it. Forest are going to come in kind of really, I think, bruised from the game against Panthers. Rhinos are going to come in, pretty confident off the back of a solid performance. So again, mindset and mentality wise, what wins? Is it confidence, or is it determination after a bruise? I think I think that's going to be the matchups for me. Is your bookends, but then again in that middle is going to be a great battle.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this before we started today when I was looking ahead to sort of preview stuff, and like I don't know where to look in this game. I think Claire's right. I think there's nothing in it in so many aspects, and maybe the most interesting aspect is kind of what both teams kind of. I said this a little bit last week. Now that league tables kind of become important, and we're seeing that natural bit of separation. There's like a 5-point gap between Mavericks, who are 4th, and Forest, who are 5th. But Rhinos have got the same number of points as Forest as well. So it feels like there's maybe a little bit of outside pressure on this to get a result. So how do both teams deal with that? I like what Rhinos have been doing, but as sort of Lauren Palmer told us, that they've been making a lot of mistakes themselves. That might get put under pressure against a team who can play relentlessly in Forest. I think at times when you see Hannah Layton and when you see sort of Neve Cooper and when Iona Christian comes into the mix, there's a bit of a frantic pace to the way Forest play, and that can go in both directions. You can lose a bit of control or kind of wrestle back sort of some momentum. This is a really fudged way of me saying I've got absolutely no idea what's going to happen. I think it will be really good. I tend to favour maybe just that little bit more experience of Forest, but I'm fascinated to see like how the tactical battle unfolds. Lauren Palmer and Chelsea Palmer, two new coaches. Yeah. We've Chelsea Pittman. Sorry, we've seen sort of from both of them like some really positive and kind of a real drive to impact the game from the bench in different ways. So I think that perhaps might be crucial, and how they choose not only to start but maybe how they choose to finish games as well. That's a really terrible answer, but I think it underlines the fascination in the game. I think it's pretty open. It's pretty kind of anything could happen. I wouldn't be surprised. You could tell me a draw or either team win by 5 or 6, and I'd say, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think I agree with you both. I just keep going like through the teams in my head, and I do think down one end, I think Rolene Stricker beats Jiva Mentor, and I think Rhea Dixon's movement is better than Ella Bowen's. But then when I look down the other end at Joyce, and I'm just like, oh God, like Jada Bekover with all the, even with the jumps, Joyce is just so powerful. So the ball has to be stopped earlier than that. So yeah, I think tactically, I think you're right, Paul. I think the answer probably lies in the setups rather than the individuals. But we'll see, because that's going to be something you got to choose which one you want to watch, because you can't do both, or you dub screen. It's up to you. But 2 Sky streams at once. Good luck. Anyway, Sunday. Oh, we've alluded to it. We've pointed to it. Pulse versus Dragons at the Copper Box, 6 p.m. It's on Sky. Tough day, but we think, that could be spicy. Lots to learn, lots to try out. What do we reckon, Claire?
I think so. I mean, I think it'll be really interesting, I think, to see kind of maybe how Sam Bird approaches this game. I think, you still, for me, whatever game you go into, I think you've got to send a message that you're starting your strongest, because that's where you want to kind of go in with the game, and you want to start hard and ensure that you're kind of the girls that have been starting for you kind of do that job for you. So I think, yeah, I'll be interested. I think as the game kind of develops, we've now seen a side of Sam that kind of that decides not to make changes. So I'll be interested, I think, to see how she uses her bench potentially this week. I think for Dragons again, it's going to be they're going to have been well focused this week. They'll have their personal targets that they will want to achieve. How that makes a dent into Pulse is going to be really interesting to see. Pulse do feel pretty untouchable at the moment, but again, when you're in that squad, when you're in that team, knowing that perhaps you're maybe a bit untouchable, again, what can that do for you? Do you get complacent? Do you kind of go, okay, this is just another week, we're on to the next, we up it, and how do you keep up in that? I think they're all kind of really things that would interest me, and how you maintain the standards and continue to push on when you're continuously winning. So I think it will be a tough game on Sunday. It's not an easy place to go, the Copper Box, to go and play. So I'm really hoping again that Dragons can just be consistent in terms of closing that score line down again this week, and tidy up on some errors.
Put your Pulse hat on, Mr. Reporter for Pulse. Tell us what you think. Have you had your preview chat yet? What do you reckon Pulse are up to for this?
No preview chat, but I think it's interesting what Claire said about kind of challenging yourselves. I asked Tyler Orr about it after the game, and what she was really interested on kind of how in the past Pulse teams have kind of started fast and maybe faded a little bit, but they are challenging themselves within the group to kind of maintain those standards, which I think was really interesting. It was good chatting to Tyler after. I think as far as the Pulse setup is concerned, we'll probably see a bit more of Darcy, of Sophie, and of Gracie in this game. Whether it's from the start or not, I'd be surprised. But it obviously represents a chance to sort of get some more players out and get some more court time into them. I think every coach we spoke to has said that being able to use the full 10 is important. I think the challenge for Pulse, in my view, and this will be part of my preview chat, spoiler alert, is kind of how they maybe push on again, because I think they started really well this season. Against Rhinos, against Panthers, and against Thunder, they've kind of maybe had to dig deep, and that's a good thing, right? I think at any point in the season, you want to be challenged because you want to know how you're going to come out on top. But we've pointed out a few times that sort of, I think Liv's been squeezed a little bit in the last couple of games, and kind of maybe seeing if there's a sort of, I wouldn't necessarily a plan B, but an alternative into how that end works. This might represent a good chance for Pulse to kind of do something different and kind of have a look at how they play. So I'll be interested to see how that evolves, because 61 against Thunder last time out, their lowest score of the season, and 68 before that against Birmingham. So it does feel like for Pulse, and this is true of any team, you kind of want to see now how you push on. Like, we've seen what they're about. We all think they're probably the benchmark from the early part of the season. But I think, and knowing kind of the players within that group, they'll be challenging themselves now to go again. They've got Dragons, then they've got Forest, and then they've got a big game against Mavericks at Wembley, which is also that big occasion. I think anything that taking place at Wembley is something that's interesting to go at. So, yeah, I think the challenge for Pulse here is maybe how do they try some things, not only from the squad perspective, but maybe from a style perspective. Chloe, you can stick your tactics hat on next week and see if we see anything different. Oh, you're not
doing
here?
It without me.
Oh, yeah, that was my deliberate setup. You're not here. You're going to leave me alone.
No, I am on
Where are you, Chloe, by the way? Let's get into this.
Yeah, I will be in Fredericton, New Brunswick in Canada, covering the mixed doubles curling competition. So,
wow.
Which will be a world championship and an Olympic qualifier. So, Yeah, in my free time, I'm doing that, so that'll be funny.
Very cool. How are you going to stay plugged in?
I'm 3 hours behind, I think,
Oh, okay, not too
so
bad.
not too bad. But I don't know. The curling is 20 teams, and they're on the ice 3 times a day, and there's 5 teams on the ice every time. So it's going to be quite a lot of curling. But I'm like super excited about that. I keep telling everybody that anybody that will listen, the British men's curling team are unbelievable, and the captain, the skip is the term of that, is in competition in mixed doubles as well, and he's just a force. So anybody that's Olympic minded, like, keep an eye. You heard it here first on the Netball Unlocked podcast. No, pivot quickly back to this game. I actually was wondering, Paul, with what is plan if Liv Sheen cannot play? What do Poles do?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I do think it's an interesting way. We saw a lot more of Nicole Brie at goal shooter last year than we did this year. But then, to be fair, with a few injuries and illness in the squad last year, Nicole Brie ended up playing in about six different positions, I think, at any given time. So Kelly obviously has kind of been bled into the team, but you're right, there isn't a like for like replacement. Should she get injured, I think if you look down to next gen, they do have Hannah Passmore in the squad, who's at least from a stature point of view, probably the closest you'd come to. It's a good question though, and maybe one we should consider a little bit more when we talk about these teams. It's like, what is your alternative? And we spoke to who were we speaking to about kind of squad building, and Lindsay Keeble last week, and said that you should be using your next gen almost as, okay, who do I use to replace this, and who do I use to replace that? So yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's really fair.
Hannah Passmore, let's imagine, comes straight into the starting 7 in that scenario as well. It's not as if you can kind of, but maybe that's true for it's not true for a team like Panthers, right? But maybe there are some other teams in the league where you might go, Dragons, for example. Well, no, Chelsea Beard is quite a good swap in for Georgia Rowe. So I don't know, not a doomsday scenario, but maybe that is an exercise that we can do. Like, if we take X out, what happens? For,
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a really good question.
And also for playoffs, right? Because you don't want to be predictable, and that's a whole other competition really in itself. So anyway, we've kind of digressed a little bit on that, but interesting, because I think it will be. I think what Sam Bird, how she decides to use the game, and also keeps the respect with Dragons, because you have to respect that there is some real quality players in that.
And that's why I think they'll go strong. They've gone strong every game so far this season.
Yeah.
There's no reason to doubt that whatsoever.
I still love the work of Jackie Newton. Excellent. I'm really big fan. Anyway.
Is that spoiler for our team of the season so far when you return from Canada, Chloe?
I don't know. I think she's just so underrated. She sits for me like she kind of Carla Pretoria-esque, where it's like she's not going to get to that. Well, she just got to that. So yeah,
That's
I don't know.
Big
I'm a big
call,
fan.
that is Carla Pretoria.
Yeah, she probably like that. But I think it's that kind of. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop myself before I say some more rubbish. Anyway, Monday.
You're already in Canada, aren't you? You're already on the ice, Chloe.
Imagine. Monday, we have a Monday game.
You do, yeah.
Thunder versus Mavericks at the Bellevue, 7 p.m. on BBC. Both teams copped a loss. Claire, this could be quite a good one.
Yeah, I think so. I think kind of related to what you were just saying in terms of kind of how teams are going to be starting to come up against each other. You know, knowledge is power now in terms of the footage, the analysis, etc. Yeah. And there's not much change that teams can provide as different options. You know that for certain that Mickey Austin will do her homework. You know, she is no stone unturned, and won't cut corners in terms of that analysis side of things. So I have no doubt that Mavericks will have done a wealth of homework on Manchester Thunder. However, I think what I envisage perhaps Manchester Thunder is again just simply staying in that bubble, concentrating on what Thunder do well, and what they just personally need to work on to allow them to keep ticking over. I think they will concentrate more so on the things that they need to fix in-house, because they did well against an experienced Pulse. And it's just kind of tweaks here and there that I believe that they'll just have to manage in order then to crack on against Mavericks. So I think Mavericks will be chomping at the bit to get a win over Thunder, and I think they'll be ready to put in a 60-minute performance. But Thunder, I imagine, just perhaps going under the radar, focusing on themselves. You'd think of kind of mid-court again, Amy Carter versus Ellie Ratu. I think again that's going to be a fantastic game. You've got two youngsters, Izzy Phillips and Emma Rayner, wing attack, wing D. I think that's going to be a real battle to contend with. And then you've got El Marie versus Raz Quashie. What a matchup. Nicola Smith versus Thacker. I think it's got potential again to go kind of all the way for 60 minutes, but I think for me, Thunder are just kind of I think very humbly growing in confidence, and putting out perhaps more of the consistent 60 minutes so far. So I think for me, they just have the edge.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're edging closer towards kind of international kind of window time where we hear the squads. I think that Emma Rayner, Izzy Phillips battle will be interesting. I think both of those would kind of maybe be, I'm not going to say outsiders, but maybe in that sort of tier down and challenging to get into the international kind of reckoning for the Roses. I think at the other end, whether we might see a Nicola Smith start for the first time. If you look at the height of Emily Andrew and Emma Thacker, maybe this might be a good game to bring Smith in from the start. Karen, after the game, was telling me about sort of how they're easing her back. I wonder if maybe this might be the first chance we get to see her from the start. I think two of the more underrated players this season have been Taylor McKevitt and Susie Liversidge. They'll go up against each other, I think, in another sort of kind of speedy contest. And I think what was really interesting about how McKevitt kept Scholes sort of quiet for large parts, and they both had their moments, was she was just able to match her from an energy perspective. I think Liversidge's evolvement you pointed this out a couple of weeks ago, Chloe, into a sort of wing attack of real substance. Like she went into round 6 leading the league in feeds. She's really sort of come of age in that position. So going up against sort of McKevitt and then that proven Thunder defence, how she tackles that, I think will be a really good step for her, because she's come on in leaps and bounds this year. So yeah, good matchups all over the court here, I think. Thunder at home though, always hard to go against them. They'll probably be too strong, I think, and it'll maybe be sort of third quarter they start to pull away. But again, they all look like decent matchups, and I think the interesting thing here from a table perspective is obviously Mavericks are fourth at the moment, and a defeat for them then opens the door for sort of, I suppose at the moment you would say, Rhinos, Forest and Panthers, if Panthers can sort of string 2 or 3 wins together. So I think maybe what this does for other teams away from Bellevue is maybe just as interesting this weekend.
That's a great point. We can always trust on you, Paul, to be looking at tables and numbers.
I used to turn league tables into storylines for producers. I could tell you a million stories about a league table.
So you're the guy where everyone's like, what happens if? And then he's there in the corner like, this is what happens.
So we're sidetracked here. You've told us your curling story. My first job at Sky Sports was as a football statistician. and I would sort of have to travel up and down the country in the back of the truck, kind of putting stats in and making notes of what's happening in games. But you have never felt pressure unless you have worked on the final day of the season and you have to build an as it stands table when the world is watching to see who might be in the relegation zone or the playoff places. Pressure, that was pressure, trying to build a league table in double quick time and also explain to producers and commentators what's just happened somewhere else. That was crazy.
Can I ask a curler if it's more pressure than trying to compete for an Olympic spot? No, to pivot back again to the netball, as we should on this podcast. But I think the one thing with Nicola Smith, which I think is really cool that she's building into it, and really, I think, did put her hand up for a start, I think, with that performance. Just the arms are so epic. But I think that one thing with Karen Gregg that's very cool is that she, and we've seen this from her in seasons past, is that she'll pull out a combination kind of later on. So it will be, and often players will come on and do a job to then bring on the next player to do a job. And if Gregg can get that going with McCormick and Smith.
I agree entirely, yeah.
And I still think Mavericks at goal attack position is the kryptonite still, because there's no 60-minute performance from any of their. Well, obviously Kira Rothwell is out, but I don't think Emma Thacker is 60-minute goal attack. So that's such a great moment for Smith McCormick to kind of share the load and pass the bib around and really kind of make a play, because I think Mickey Austin will be on it. Tamsin Greenway won't be far away from it tactically as well. Gemma Donoghue on Anya and Shannon, who, however Gregg decides to play that will be tough. That's a tough ask. And I think, like I said, Razia Kwashi is looking good. So yeah, I think though, probably Thunder, right? I think that's what we're going to say. Claire, you got a score on this one, or you kind of stopped giving numbers?
Yeah, we didn't put her under pressure for the rest.
I think I peaked at my draw. I'm going to say Thunder by 3.
Oh,
so I think Mavericks are going to have a bonus point. Yeah.
Wow.
There we go.
That shut me up.
I know.
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
I've gone really out there on my predictions.
Ask and you shall receive. There you go.
Excellent. Wow.
Okay, that's all 4 games kind of done and dusted. And before we wrap up, we said we'd ask you a little bit, Claire, but kind of where do you stand on the season so far? We've had 6 weeks or 6 rounds of action. The table's taken a little bit of shape. We've obviously gone through the preview, but what are your sort of, I don't know, I'm not going to call it winners and losers, that's never very fair, but what have you enjoyed, and maybe what would you like to see more of as we kind of get ready for the rest of the season?
I think overall, like each week we're seeing improvements, whether that be from kind of your coverage to kind of your tactics, to closing margins, to to viewings, etc. So I think week in, week out, we're seeing improvements, and my overall stance is kind of, I feel really passionate around netball culture as a whole. And I think what we're starting to see, which I think is really exciting for the sport, is we're seeing kind of we're seeing accountability being taken no matter who it is, and that's the main, I think, takeaway from me is, from the volunteers to the coaches to the players to the umpires to the cameramen, everyone has their role to play in this venture of turning netball professional, and we're seeing kind of week in, week out incremental differences and improvements, which I think needs to be celebrated a little bit more. I think from a playing perspective, I mentioned earlier, I'm starting to see now the tactical element of the super shot and the difference, I think, between the clinical nature of the game when you're just playing 1 points for 10 minutes versus then what teams tend to do on the 2 pointers. And, I think one of the main tactics I've seen so far is ensuring that you score your 1 points on a turnovers. The centre pass is your given, so go for the 2. That's maybe what I've seen so far. But again, defensively as well, we're starting to see tactics emerge, which I'm really enjoying. And I've personally found, actually, as the weeks have gone on, the super shot more exciting. Something I reflected on when I first came on was I wasn't a massive fan of the timeouts. And I've done a bit of a turn of the corner on that opinion. And I think it was actually this week that really changed my opinion. Because I did actually see teams respond really, really well to that information that was given to them. One resulted in a 1-goal win. And so actually it stopped a blowout, which arguably might have been the way in which it was heading when you're 7-1 down, if there hadn't been some form of intervention. So I've been enjoying actually how tactical timeouts have maintained teams in the game for longer. I think, there's always going to be things to improve. That's going to come when we're not even kind of halfway. I think I'd like to see it. I think a little bit more consistency in terms of this phrase of contest. Some games feel as though you're able to contest a little bit more than other games, and I this is probably quite controversial, but I think I would argue that it feels as though some teams can contest more than others. So I think as ever, I think I would personally never be an umpire. Credit to them, and what they do and how they read the game and the decisions that they have to make in such quick succession. I could just never do, or I would just be. I couldn't take the kind of the looks and the things that you get after making a call. I'd probably cry after most games. However, I think this is probably a long-standing conversation that we have had in the league is around how do you have that confidence that all umpires are on the same level when it comes to allowing contest evenly between teams.
Excellent.
We need to start by paying them. Like,
It would be a start.
Yeah,
it would be a start.
I think it's perfectly fair. Like when you discuss like that, players, officials, coaches, whatever, are starting to get paid, then like naturally the next part of the conversation should be those who are enforcing the rules. I think it absolutely has to be sort of a natural next part of this conversation, however that's going to kind of play out over the next sort of, presumably after season 1, there'll be some sort of review. And I would say squad sizes, maybe the umpires, that's probably where you want to start this, I think, in terms of what's next.
For sure. I think the first round where we didn't have a big injury, right? Is that fair? Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, I think so. I think on that, Chloe, I think that would be something that I will stay strong with. I think for the rest of the season is the leaving out of training partners. I still believe that we went to 10 way too early. So I think for me that's been a big loss is training without training partners.
Vic was brilliant on that. We know this because nearly all the coaches we've spoken to, whether that's in person as boots on the ground reporters, or whether that's for our sort of, we've been really lucky to have them on for extended interviews. Almost everyone has said, just from a squad size point of view, like they feel like that will be where they come at the end of the season, and that's fine, right? We said all along that there were going to be points here where it's all right to admit we might not have got this right, but putting it right is really where the kind of this journey will move forward. I think putting those things right.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty, I think, sometimes of throwing the kitchen sink at an entire project is you will have a lot of learnings that come from that. I think the message is to not shy away from it, and it can be hard not to do that because it feels like you're constantly under battle or constantly being criticised, and that's not nice to have to take. But I think it's okay to kind of take that accountability and say, you know, we're not going to get things right straight away. It's impossible. But again, the beauty of perhaps doing everything at a pace at what we have done is that we can take very quick learnings and make them right quicker than perhaps if we'd slowly but surely done that as a model. So I think there is pros and cons, but I think not to shy away from things that maybe could be fixed or could be improved is definitely key.
Not least when we are talking about people's welfare. Like, I think with that one, right, that's the big thing. We're talking about people's safety, people's health, the mental, physical. Like, that's why, to me, I hope that they're listening to what you've just said so beautifully, Claire, because that to me just feels like, look at where we are.
Yeah,
and
just look at it.
Look at it. Cool. Well, Paul, I guess this is goodbye for a
Farewell.
week.
It's been intense, Chloe.
Yes, I'll be
exchanging messages with you on an hourly basis for this next couple of weeks.
Yeah, you'll I'll be quiet in the morning for sure. I'll be fast asleep. But no, yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, we ought to, before I start saying adieu, to Claire for coming back. We didn't scare her off the first time.
Thank you for having me back. It's been a pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoy your takes and opinions. They're so measured and so well thought through, and yeah, so really we benefit from your wisdom in so many ways. So thank you. And Paul, I think, when are we going to do our team of the midway season? When are we? We'll
do it when you come back, Chloe. Right? You've got a flight to kind of ponder, and we've said that we'll kind of both pick a 7. We'll try and be different in each position, but if there's a consensus, and you know, we might try and get a fancy graphic for this as well, and let's try and have some fun with it.
I think the graphic department might be in Canada as well. So,
but yeah, that's when we'll be back. We'll be back with I'll be back next week with a guest TBC. Might just be me talking to myself, and I'm only joking. And then when you come back, we'll probably look back on round 8 and we'll have a review of the team of the season so far, which will be exciting. And maybe we'll put a bit of a rallying call out on socials and see what the kind of general consensus is.
What if we do like a NBA style where we kind of sort of, you know how like the MVP is voted on by like coaches, players and media? Maybe we could set up our own for end of season awards and do something like that. That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the personnel department, Chloe. We'll have to get onto them.
Yeah, we need to speak to them.
Got many moving parts.
They might also be in Canada.
On that note, we'll bid you farewell. Au revoir, as they say in some parts of Canada, at least. And thanks, Claire, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Bye.